Hello. Let us proceed to our next topic, and that is analysis of propositions. We have discussed that there are so many reasons why some people fall into fallacious arguments, but one of which is the inability or failure to understand propositions that are being used in an argument. What are propositions? Propositions, first of all, are either true or false. Please take note of that, okay? But when you say argument, an argument is either valid or invalid. Okay? A proposition is either true or false, and an argument is either valid or invalid. Propositions comprise an argument. Now let's understand what a proposition is. First of all, a proposition is a sentence. It expresses a complete thought. But not all sentences are propositions. So when you say jump, that's a complete sentence, right? When you say run, that is a complete sentence, but not a proposition. A proposition is either true or false. For example, all human beings are subject to perish and disintegrate. Is that true or false? That's a proposition. When you say all human beings are subject to mistakes, that's a sentence and that's a proposition. It's either true or false. So we have to understand that a proposition must have at least three elements. Take note of this. You have a subject, you have a predicate, and a copula. A copula is simply a linking verb. Is, are, was, were. Those are examples of copula. Okay? Now, there are different ways to analyze propositions. We can analyze proposition according to the quantity, quality of the proposition, and based on the quantity and quality, we can identify the symbols and then the quantity of the predicate. This would be a basic understanding of what a proposition is, which would be very essential when we go to the analysis of arguments. Now, let's start with quantity of proposition. When you say quantity of the proposition, it means what? First, when you say quantity, what enters your mind? Okay? When you say quantity, we're referring to numbers. Okay? So, a proposition, based on its quantity, can be categorized as universal, singular, or particular. Okay, how do we know if a proposition is universal? First, it is universal if it asserts or applies to all members of a certain class. We have some guidelines or some indicators. For example, general statements. General statements are universal. For example, dogs are man's best friend. That's a universal proposition. Or you say men are polygamous by nature. That is general. Women are fickle-minded. That's a general statement. Sometimes we are also guided by universal quantifiers. For example, when you use or see words like all, that would signify that the proposition is universal. Can you think of other universal quantifiers? Okay, we have all, every, everyone, no one, nobody, nothing. These are some examples. So when you say everyone is invited to my party, that proposition is universal. There are other universal quantifiers like whoever, Whenever, whenever you see a rainbow, think of me. That is a universal proposition. Wherever, whatever, forever is not included, okay? So those are some examples of universal quantifiers. Okay? Any question? Now this time, how would you know if the quantity of a proposition is particular? From the root word part, a part of a certain whole. So when you say particular, at least one member of a certain class is asserted. We have some quantifiers or some indicators. For example, when you use the words indefinite pronouns, that is a particular quantifier. Can you think of some indefinite pronouns? Okay, that's correct. We have some, several, not all, not every, few, almost all, nearly all. Those are some examples of indefinite pronouns. When you also use numbers, that is also particular. Even though how big the number is, that would signify that the proposition is still particular. For example, 1 million people went out to vote. That's a big number when you say 1 million. But the proposition is particular. Okay? What else? Half of the class passed in the recent long exam. That is a particular proposition. The demonstrative pronouns those and these would also be particular. For example, those are some of my favorite things. That's particular. When you use also words or an, a and an, that will also be particular. For example, a cup, an apple, that would be particular. Okay? How do we know if a proposition is singular? First, it could refer to a single object, and it is something definite. So when you say, that chair, that would be singular. This table, that would be singular. Nouns generally are singular propositions. Can you still remember what a noun is? What is a noun? Okay, a noun is a name of a person, place, or things. That would be singular. We also have personal pronouns. Can you give me examples of personal pronouns? Okay. I, he, she, it, my. Those are examples. So when you say, we are the world, and we are the children, a proposition is singular. Okay? Okay, what's the quantity of this proposition? Okay, universal. That's right. How about this one? What's the quantity? Okay, this one is particular. Not all is particular. That's right. Here's another one. What's the quantity? Okay, it's particular. Here's another one. What's the quantity? Very good. That's a universal proposition. You're doing fine. There is another way of analyzing propositions, and that would be analysis of the quality. When you say quality of a proposition, it can only be categorized in two ways. Either it's affirmative or negative. How do we know if it is an affirmative proposition? It is affirmative when the predicate accepts something about the subject. Okay? Affirmative if the predicate accepts something about the subject. When you say negative, the predicate denies or rejects something about the subject. Did you get that? Negative if the predicate denies or rejects something about the subject. Normally, when you see the words no, none, not all, nothing, nobody, that would signify the proposition is negative. Oh, but take note, not always. You have to understand the entire proposition. Sometimes you see the word not, but the proposition actually is affirmative. But as a general rule, when you see the words no, none, not all, etc., this would signify again that the proposition is a negative proposition. As a basic rule also, avoid double negation. Okay, for example, not all fruits are not sweet. Oh, please don't do that. Okay? Maybe what you wanted to say is some fruits are sweet. Our objective is not to confuse our readers or our listeners. So if you simply want to say that some fruits are sweet, then you state it that way. Okay? Now let's have some exercises on quality of proposition. Now look at this. What is the quality of the proposition? This is affirmative. Very good. Let's analyze this next proposition. What is the quality of the proposition? Okay, very good. The quality is affirmative. Consider this next example. What's the quality of the proposition? Okay, the quality is negative. Very good. How about this proposition? Okay, the quality is negative. Very good. Now look at this diagram. This diagram leads us to another way by which we can analyze a proposition. Based on the quantity and the quality, we can identify the symbols. Notice that we have in a triangle here the symbols A, E, I, and O. Now pay attention to the words that you see outside of the square. On the upper part, you have the AE proposition, and AE propositions are universal or singular. I and O propositions are both particular. A and I are both affirmative. EO are both negative. So whenever you analyze propositions, you are guided by both the quantity and the quality. So again, if it is universal affirmative, that's A. Universal negative, that's E. Particular affirmative, that's I. And particular negative is O. The symbols AI came from the Latin word affirmo. Okay, so A and I are both affirmative, as you can see in the diagram. And the symbols EO came from the Latin word nego. Not negro, no? Nego. So EO are both negative propositions. So easy to remember, right? Okay, analyze first the quantity and the quality. So this one is a universal affirmative proposition. So the symbol is A. You're right. Look at the other example. The quantity of the proposition is universal. Quality is negative. So the symbol is E. Very good. Next, this one is a particular. And what's the quality? Affirmative proposition. So the symbol is I. Very good. Let's look at the next example. What's the quantity of the proposition? Okay, this one is particular, and the quality would be negative. Not all is particular negative. So this proposition is symbolized as O. Very good. You're doing fine. Let's now go to the analysis of the quantity of the predicate. When you are asked about the quantity of the predicate, that would be different from quantity of the proposition. When you're asked about the quantity of the proposition, you look at the subject and be guided by the quantifiers. It's either universal, singular, or particular. But when you say quantity of the predicate, it can only be particular or universal. There are two rules that you have to remember here. The first rule is, if the quality of the proposition is affirmative, automatically the quantity of the predicate would be particular. Remember that when we say quality of proposition is either affirmative or negative. Okay? So, if the quality is affirmative, the quantity of the predicate automatically is particular. That's the first rule. Second rule, if the quality of the proposition is negative, automatically the quantity of the predicate would be universal. One more time. If the quality of the proposition is negative, automatically the quantity of the predicate would be universal. Did you get that? Okay, let's do some practice problems. Now look at this proposition. What is the quality of the proposition? Okay, since the quality of the proposition is affirmative, the predicate very low would be particular. Let's analyze the next proposition. What is the quality of the proposition? Okay, since it is affirmative, the quantity of the predicate conduct an experiment would be particular. Notice that the proposition is universal, but the quantity of the predicate is particular because the quality is affirmative. Did you get that? Let's analyze the next proposition. What is the quantity of the proposition? Okay, it is universal. Quality is, that's right, negative. So the quantity of the predicate would be automatically universal. Any questions? Let's move to the next proposition. What is the quantity of the proposition? Okay, some is particular. The quality is negative. So the quantity of the predicate would be universal. Very good. Notice that in this example, the proposition is particular, but the quantity of the predicate is universal. Let's look at this example. The quantity of the proposition is particular. The quality is negative, so the quantity of the predicate would be automatically universal. Did you get that? So easy. Any questions?